Before a man can lead anyone, whether in a relationship, a family, or a community, he must first learn to lead himself. That's where real respect begins. It doesn't start with how much you earn, how tall you are, or how charming you can be in a conversation. It starts with self-discipline, with emotional control, with the quiet, consistent choices you make when no one is watching. Because if a man can't direct his own life, how can a woman trust him to help guide hers? Self-leadership is not glamorous. It's not always loud or praised. It's waking up when you said you would, even when you don't feel like it. It's staying calm in moments that beg for emotional reaction. It's choosing what's right over what's easy every single time. And women respect men who have this kind of structure, not because they crave perfection, but because they crave consistency. There's security in a man who leads himself. He becomes an anchor in a world full of chaos. When a man is led by impulse, by mood swings, by insecurity, it creates emotional instability, and whether consciously or subconsciously, a woman begins to pull back, not out of judgment, but out of instinct, because femininity seeks out something it can lean on, not something to control, but something that's already standing strong without needing to be held up. Now here's where it gets deeper. A man who leads himself isn't afraid of solitude. He doesn't fill the silence with distractions. He uses it to sharpen his focus. That kind of man walks into a room and doesn't need to prove anything, because his presence already carries the weight of discipline, of thought, of mastery. It's felt, and women respect what's felt more than what's said. Think about this. The man who leads himself doesn't just respond to life, he designs it. He's intentional with his time, mindful with his emotions, and decisive in his actions. He doesn't look for permission to be powerful, he just is. And that's not arrogance, it's alignment. He's aligned with his own values, his own standards, and that's what makes him reliable. This kind of leadership isn't about dominance. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or having all the answers. It's about being centered, steady. A man who doesn't lose himself when he's praised and doesn't break apart when he's criticized. Because when you can lead yourself, you're not easily shaken by outside forces, and that steadiness becomes magnetic. So if you're waiting for a woman to follow you, ask yourself, have you learned to follow through on your own word first? Are you the kind of man whose habits reflect discipline, whose actions reflect wisdom, and whose presence brings peace? Because in the end, women don't follow the loudest man. They follow the most centered one, the one who leads himself so well, others naturally trust his direction. Be that man. Respect at its deepest level isn't just about admiration, it's about emotional safety. A woman may be impressed by your looks, your money, or your charm, but none of that lasts if she doesn't feel safe around you. And this goes far beyond physical protection. Emotional safety is the ground where respect takes root and grows into something lasting. Women respect the man who can hold space, not just for her presence, but for her emotions, her silence, her uncertainty. She respects the man who can remain calm even when she's not. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect, emotionless, or robotic. It means you have enough emotional discipline to stay centered when things get emotionally charged. That's what makes her feel safe. Not controlled, not smothered, just safe. Emotional safety isn't about having all the answers. It's about being grounded when everything around you feels chaotic. When she's overwhelmed, she doesn't want a man who gets overwhelmed with her. She wants a man who sees her and still holds his center, who doesn't invalidate her experience, but also doesn't get swept away by it. That's leadership. That's masculinity. And that's what earns her deepest respect. A lot of men confuse making her feel safe with always agreeing, always being nice, or never expressing a firm opinion. But safety doesn't come from softness alone. It comes from certainty. It comes from stability. Women respect a man who knows how to regulate himself first. His tone, his anger, his insecurities. Because she can't feel secure with someone who's constantly reactive, defensive, or needy for her approval. That doesn't feel like strength. It feels like pressure. And let's be honest, no woman wants to be the emotional caretaker in a relationship. She doesn't want to feel like she's responsible for holding you together. What she's looking for is a partner she can trust with her vulnerability, a man who can witness her at her most raw without panicking, judging, or shutting down. That trust, that kind of emotional container, it earns more respect than anything material ever could. But this emotional safety isn't one-sided. It also means knowing how to set the tone through your energy, your presence, your ability to remain composed even when your emotions are valid and strong. She respects the man who doesn't weaponize silence or storm out of the room. The man who doesn't argue to dominate but communicates to understand. That's power. Not loud, boastful power, but quiet, steady power. The kind that builds something real. Energetic safety plays a role here too. Your vibe matters. The energy you carry into a space tells her more about you than your words ever could. Is your energy scattered, anxious, overly eager, or is it centered, calm, assured? A man with grounded energy doesn't have to raise his voice to be heard. His presence says everything. It tells her, I've got me, and I don't need you to fix, validate, or complete me. When a woman feels emotionally and energetically safe with a man, her respect for him becomes foundational. It's not just about how he treats her, it's about how he holds himself. Because that's what tells her how he'll treat her in the long run. Will he protect her heart the same way he protects his peace? Will he hold space for her growth without making it about himself? These aren't just romantic questions, they're psychological filters. And once she sees you pass those filters, respect becomes automatic. So if you've ever wondered why some men are deeply respected while others struggle to be taken seriously, look beyond surface traits. Look at how those men carry themselves. Look at how they protect their energy, how they handle emotion, and how they make others feel, not by being perfect, but by being present. Because at the end of the day, the man a woman respects the most isn't the one who promises to keep her safe. It's the one whose presence makes her feel like she already is. Be that man. There's a quiet tragedy happening among men today. Many are abandoning their masculine essence in an attempt to be liked, to be accepted, to be harmless. They think that by softening themselves, by becoming more agreeable, more accommodating, they'll be easier to love. But what often happens is the opposite. Respect begins to fade. Because women don't respect men who betray their masculinity just to fit in. They respect the man who stays rooted in it, even when it's not always comfortable. Masculinity isn't about dominance or aggression. It's about strength, emotional, mental, and directional strength. It's about decisiveness, stability, and presence. It's about being the kind of man who doesn't just react to the world, but shapes it. When a man loses that, when he dilutes his masculine core just to be perceived as nice or safe, he may gain temporary approval, but he loses long-term admiration. Let's be clear, women do want emotional connection, but not at the cost of strength. Vulnerability, when rooted in confidence, is powerful, but vulnerability that stems from insecurity feels like a burden. Women want a man who can be open without being dependent, soft without being spineless, present without being passive. That balance between strength and sensitivity, that's where respect lives. When a man is constantly trying to please, constantly adjusting himself to avoid discomfort, it shows a lack of internal leadership. And as we've already discussed, self-leadership is foundational. A woman can sense when a man is walking on eggshells around her. And while she might initially appreciate the effort, over time she'll begin to question his depth, his backbone, his ability to lead under pressure. She's not looking for a servant. She's looking for a partner who stands tall even when things get tough. There's something deeply attractive about a man who embraces his masculine nature unapologetically, who protects, provides, and leads not because he wants recognition, but because it's who he is. A man who makes decisions, who takes responsibility, who doesn't collapse under emotion, but channels it. This doesn't mean he doesn't listen or doesn't compromise, but it means he doesn't shrink to keep the peace. He holds his ground, and in doing so, he creates the kind of emotional structure that a woman can relax into. Too often, men are told to soften every edge in the name of love, But what builds lasting connection isn't softness alone, it's balance, it's polarity. Feminine energy naturally respects masculine energy when it's expressed with integrity. So if you trade your masculinity to gain love, you might get attention, but you won't get respect. So ask yourself honestly, have you been shrinking yourself to become more likable, or are you standing in who you are, allowing your masculine energy to lead with clarity and courage? Because the man who owns his masculinity without shame, who stays grounded in strength and heart, doesn't have to chase respect. He embodies it. There's a certain kind of man that intrigues a woman, not because he's flashy or overly romantic, but because he carries himself with a quiet confidence. He doesn't reveal everything about himself right away. He's not constantly trying to explain who he is or win anyone over. He's present, but not predictable, available, but not desperate. That man holds a level of mystery that commands respect. You see, there's a huge difference between emotional openness and emotional neediness. Too many men confuse vulnerability with oversharing. They think that spilling every thought, every fear, every past heartbreak will make them more relatable. But what it actually does is signal instability. When a man constantly needs reassurance, when he's always seeking validation through emotional dumping, it doesn't build connection, it builds pressure. And women don't respect pressure. They respect composure. Mystery isn't about playing games or hiding who you are. It's about having a sense of inner world that isn't easily accessed by just anyone. It's about letting your presence speak louder than your words. When a man has emotional control, when he doesn't overreact, over-explain, or overstep, it communicates that he's not driven by anxiety, he's driven by intention. And that's deeply attractive on a psychological level. A mysterious man doesn't feel the need to fill every silence. He's comfortable sitting with his thoughts. He chooses what to share carefully, and when he speaks, it means something. This creates an emotional pull, because let's be honest, what's easily available rarely feels valuable. It's human nature, and women are deeply intuitive. They can sense when a man is trying too hard to be accepted. That energy repels respect. But when a man stays grounded, when he allows mystery to build naturally, he's inviting curiosity rather than forcing connection. That curiosity is where attraction grows. That curiosity is what makes her respect his mind before anything else. Because she knows he's not just emotionally reactive, he's emotionally mature. And don't misunderstand this. Emotional maturity doesn't mean shutting down or being cold. It means knowing how to express your feelings without making them someone else's responsibility. It means being emotionally aware without being emotionally dependent. That balance between openness and restraint is rare, and that rarity earns respect. This is why some men who don't say much still command a room. It's not about silence, it's about substance. He's not trying to prove his worth. He's already aware of it. That internal stability is what draws women in. They respect a man who doesn't seek attention because he is attention. So ask yourself, are you giving everything away too soon, hoping to be understood, or are you holding space for curiosity, connection, and discovery? Because the man who doesn't need to reveal everything at once, the man who holds just enough back to remain intriguing, is the man she'll think about long after the conversation ends. Be that man. There's something deeply powerful about a man who can say no without guilt and yes without fear. A man who doesn't twist himself into shapes to fit into someone else's comfort zone. This isn't about being cold or emotionally unavailable. It's about having a strong sense of self. And women don't just notice this, they respect it, because boundaries aren't barriers, they're signs of self-worth. When a man doesn't set boundaries, he's unknowingly communicating one thing: I'll trade my peace for your presence. And as noble as that may sound on the surface, underneath it breeds quiet resentment, emotional instability, and eventually a loss of attraction. Women respect men who know where they end and others begin. A man who sets limits isn't doing it to offend, he's doing it to protect the integrity of his own energy. Let's get something straight. Respect and likability are not always aligned. A man who constantly agrees, constantly says yes, and avoids conflict at all costs might be liked, but he won't be respected. Why? Because she can't trust him to stand firm when it matters. If you're always saying what she wants to hear, how will she ever believe that your words come from conviction rather than convenience? Women test boundaries, not because they're trying to manipulate, but because they're biologically wired to search for safety and strength. Subconsciously, she wants to know, can this man hold his frame when challenged? Will he abandon himself to keep me happy? And when she realizes that he won't, that he'll calmly but firmly hold his line, it builds trust. It tells her that this man isn't emotionally reactive, he's grounded, stable, that she can relax into his presence without having to lead the emotional dance. And this goes deeper than just romantic relationships. In all areas of life, when a man fails to set boundaries, people begin to treat him as disposable. But when a man draws a line respectfully, clearly, and without apology, he elevates his value, not just in the eyes of women, but in society. Because he's not afraid to protect what matters to him, his time, his peace, his energy. Boundaries also reflect self-awareness. You have to know yourself to know what your limits are, what drains you, what breaks you, what you won't tolerate. And here's the truth, if you don't define your boundaries, someone else will define them for you. And usually, it won't be in your favor. So if you're the type of man who always bends to avoid conflict, who sacrifices authenticity for harmony, ask yourself, is this really peace, or are you just postponing the explosion? Because real peace comes from clarity, not compliance. Women respect a man who doesn't fear being misunderstood if it means staying true to who he is. Never be afraid to disappoint someone if it means remaining loyal to your values. Because when a man protects his boundaries, he doesn't lose love, he gains respect. Let's talk about something powerful, something that changes how women see a man at his core. Women don't respect the man who's constantly chasing attention, approval, or applause. They respect the man who's grounded in something deeper, a man who's led by purpose, not validation. And yes, there's a major difference between the two. Validation is external. It's fragile. It depends on others clapping for you, liking you, telling you you're enough. But purpose? Purpose is internal. It's stable. It comes from within, and it doesn't need the spotlight to feel valuable. A purpose-driven man wakes up with direction. His actions aren't random. His energy isn't scattered. He knows what he's building, and he doesn't need everyone to understand it. That kind of quiet confidence is irresistible. It speaks louder than any words he could say. See, many men today have confused being liked with being respected. But being likable doesn't always invite admiration. In fact, when a man constantly tries to win a woman over with excessive kindness, people-pleasing, or over-availability, it triggers something subtle but important in her psychology. She begins to feel that this man's self-worth is dependent on her response, that his emotional thermostat rises and falls based on how she treats him. And that doesn't make her feel safe. It makes her feel responsible for him. That's not attraction. That's pressure. Now contrast that with a man who walks in purpose. He's not rude, he's not arrogant, but he has a life, a mission, a rhythm that doesn't skip just because someone else's approval isn't present. This man doesn't need to be liked to move forward. He keeps moving regardless. And it's that movement, that intentional pursuit of something bigger than himself, that makes a woman look twice, not just because he's doing something impressive, but because he's not waiting for her to validate his existence. That's masculine energy. And that energy commands respect. A man like that is magnetic not because he's flashy or loud, but because he's grounded. He's rooted in a sense of self that can't be shaken by silence, rejection, or even temporary loss. He's unbothered, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows who he is beyond the moment. And when a woman sees that, something shifts. She realizes she's not dealing with a boy looking for affirmation. She's standing in front of a man with vision. And here's the thing, purpose doesn't always mean a high-paying career or a flashy goal. It could be the purpose of becoming a better father, the mission of building emotional mastery, the calling to grow spiritually, financially, mentally. It's not about the size of the purpose, it's about the consistency of the commitment to it. Women feel that energy. They sense when a man is rooted in more than his ego. So if you want to be the kind of man women truly respect, stop trying to impress and start trying to become. Because the most respected men are not the ones who talk the loudest. They're the ones who walk with purpose and let their silence do the talking.